Hey, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. And today we're getting into some of the costs that go into setting up your own Shopify store. So if you're interested in doing that, maybe after your Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign, or you're just kind of getting into it now, I'm going to run through that today. Hope you enjoy it. It's coming up right after this. Okay. So let's get right into this. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. So I teach a lot about Kickstarter, Indiegogo. I've written the book, The Kickstarter Launch Formula. Got a great podcast out there as well called Crowdfunding Demystified on Spotify, iTunes, on a published version on YouTube. So I do a lot of stuff when it comes to that. And one of the common questions I get is like, okay, after you've run a successful crowdfunding campaign, how the heck do you transition to e-commerce? Or even if you're just now getting started and thinking about Shopify and maybe setting up an online store, and you're wondering like, what are some of the costs that actually go into that? Not only the financial costs, but also my time. I'm gonna try and make a really good framework for you to go through and to understand this a tiny bit. Now, if you have not yet, one of the best things that you can do when it comes to learning a new subject like this is to do actually what worked really well back in the day when it comes to going to school. And I was not a fan of going to school, but it's one of the things that I took away from school is organization, right? So one of the best things you can do when it comes to learning this new skill set of Shopify is to just get a notebook and to label that notebook everything Shopify, right? Or if you want to, you can even get a folder and just start putting notes that you're collecting from Shopify and learning about this into that folder. It makes it really easy, man. And if you really want to go even step layer deeper, you could begin to do things like do digital on your Chrome browser, for example, creating a bookmark and just adding all of the learnings and teachings about Shopify to that bookmark. It's gonna make it a lot easier, I promise you, going forward, particularly with some of the stuff I'm gonna be throwing out today in today's video. Want to take all the stress out of fulfilling your Kickstarter rewards? Fulfillment is the turnkey solution that puts product delivery on autopilot. The Top Campaigns uses trusted high-tech provider to store, package, and ship their products. Focus on growing your business. Leave shipping to the experts. Don't wait. Get a custom quote from Fulfillment today. Link in the description. Okay, so let's get into this. You want to start a store. And I'm gonna make a few different assumptions here. So first of all, I'm gonna make the assumption that you already have a product that you want to sell. And if you don't yet, I have some other great videos on how to actually make a product and sort of the steps that go into that, if you will. If you already have a product, you already understand the logistics, you understand the supply chain, you know where you're getting the resources to make the product, you know where you're gonna ship it, maybe to a fulfillment company. Fulfillment is one of the sponsors of my YouTube channel, and they have really great service. You can go and check them out. More information down below. And you also have, when it comes to understanding like duties and sales tax and that kind of stuff, that kind of goes beyond today's video. And also you might want to consult an accountant, for example, or an attorney in that matter, depending on where you're selling from, the types of products that you're selling, if there are any regulations there. So I'm going to assume you've done your homework there, or shortly thereafter watching this video, you're going to begin to do your homework there. So let's get right into, for example, like now you got that stuff, how do you set up an online store? When it comes to this, you're first going to start with the actual functionality of the store. So when I think functionality, I think things like domain name, and I think about even getting and starting with your Shopify account. So first of all, when it comes to your Shopify account, I'll include a link down below. You can check out Shopify. If you haven't yet done a free trial, or you haven't yet created your account for whatever reason, you can go and just click that link down below and you can begin to get started there. That being said, you're gonna have to pick from a plan eventually. Now the plan is gonna determine some of the functionality that you have available to, it's gonna determine the number of users, for example, that can access the site, and some of the other stuff there. And you can you take your own time, you can look through at, plans are always changing, obviously, on Shopify, so I don't wanna put out too many disclaimers or claims without you first checking that. You can go and just look at the different plans and see what it is they're offering. When it comes to you could start with something that's a little bit more basic. Usually I'm starting people on the one level up that's above the basic plan because they're usually working with a marketer like myself to get help setting up the Shopify store. You got to make sure there are enough basically user accounts if you're working with other people on this store. So you have your plan. The other thing would then begin thinking about the domain name. So the domain name is really just a URL. It's basically what people can type into Google or type into their Chrome browser or Safari. I don't know who uses Safari anymore, right? Who uses Safari or Mozilla or whatever, IE Explorer, remember that back in the day? And they go to your website, right? So they type in that domain name, they go to your website. That domain name can either be bought through an external provider, for example, GoDaddy, oneandone.com, which now is like Ionos or something like that. I know they bought them out. Some other ones that are out there. You could search for, if you want to, an external provider and get the domain name now. So let's just say like you're not ready yet to set up the store, right? And you're not ready to get it on a paid plan with Shopify, but you want to make sure you get the domain name, right? So you could get that now, and it's usually maybe like $10 a month, or $10 a year, sorry. It could be highest like $15 a year. If it's more of a custom kind of domain where it's like a name .store or .tips or something like that, it might be a little bit higher, it might be like $50 a year, but really it's not gonna break the bank, put it that way. Particularly if you're doing more like a traditional domain name, definitely not gonna break the bank. On this point, I have had many coaching students who have come back to me after we have a conversation and are like, oh, Sal, I know one of your action items was to get a domain and I forgot to do it and now it's claimed, someone else got it. I don't know how, I don't know all of the specifics. I'm not that level, I would say, an expert when it comes to understanding this, but I do know this has happened many times with my coaching students. And there probably are different algorithms or different ways that they can track when you're putting in a particular URL and you don't buy it, other people might decide to buy it in some way, or the actual company in some way shows that this is a trending domain. I don't know, it goes beyond my knowledge base, right? But lo and behold, you should definitely get the domain name ASAP if you have it in your mind, you think it's a good one. I'd rather, for example, look back with a little bit of regret and maybe I got like 3 domain names and like I only use one of them and be like, okay, I'm gonna cancel the other 2, versus having that like anger and frustration of not having gotten the actual domain name that I wanted at that point in time. So make sure you get it. The other thing is the Shopify store, right? So once you have the actual Shopify store, and we're gonna assume that you're now progressing along here, and you might have a subdomain, and you can obviously then redirect the domain to that Shopify store, or you can get it through Shopify. That being said, you're gonna then start to think about the functionality that you want with that store. So Shopify itself comes with a lot of great functionality. So you could just use like the default theme, for example. You could, if you want to, just use the customization ability that's there. There's a lot of great stuff, you know, built in like payment processing, analytics, abandoned cart, that kind of stuff, notification, etc. So there's a lot that is built in. But that being said, if you really want a robust store, typically most people are going to be going a little bit outside of just the core Shopify platform, and you're going to be looking into some of the apps that are available on the Shopify marketplace. And to me, that's actually one of the most powerful parts of Shopify. You think about other platforms out there, WooCommerce, you think about WordPress with all the different plugins and stuff that's available there, or Magento, right? Wix. Like to me, the biggest seller of Shopify is just all the incredible apps and supportive community that is out there. So the next step is that you're gonna wanna begin to do some research. And this is kind of where the notebook comes in handy. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna spend maybe 30 minutes or an hour, set aside a Sunday or something like that, and start to just research some of the different free and paid apps that are out there that can really build in more functionality into your store. Now, those are gonna be dependent on you and what you wanna include in the store, but they might, for example, be apps that help sync up with your logistics or your fulfillment provider. They might be apps that help with getting better customer reviews or testimonials or really nice looking things there. Think a little bit about that and take some time just to research some of the top trending apps this year and the year prior. And what that's basically is just like low hanging fruit where you can really easily supercharge, you can really easily build in a lot of robust functionality into your store ASAP without having to then rely on some of the stuff I'm gonna talk about in a little bit. So that's to me the next step. And some of those apps might be paid, so that would also be the next expense aside from the domain name and aside from actually getting the Shopify store. Okay, so you got all that going away. You know, you're going strong. You're making some progress here, which I'm always excited about. Progress is always really fun. You're now going to kind of get into this, what I call this fork in the road. Okay, so the fork in the road is that you now understand like the bare bones of the car or the automobile, and now it's like, how do we want it to make it look? Is it gonna look like boxy, or is it gonna look really sleek, or is it gonna be a convertible? Like you're looking at, think about the look a little bit. Or a better way to think about this is you're basically building a butterfly net, right? Or you're building like a mousetrap, or you're building a spider's web, right? And you're like, how do we now want this mousetrap to look? Do we want it to blend in? Do we want it to look this way or that way? You're gonna get more into the appearance of the store. And this to me is when a lot of people get bogged down and when they also make a lot of bad decisions, quite honestly, when it comes to e-commerce. So I'm gonna give you 3 routes that you can go down. These are like the 3 forks in the road, and you can decide which one you're gonna walk down, and it's gonna come with different pluses and minuses. So the first one is you could do it yourself. Right? So you could spend time watching tutorial videos, spending your time on YouTube, looking through Shopify tutorials, etc. And you could find a theme out there that you want to install on the store. Or maybe you want to also do a little bit of your own like logo work or your own color work or that kind of stuff, and you want to do your own style store. This route is usually taken by amateurs in terms of maybe new to business and they're not spending a smaller budget. They don't have enough money to spend on hiring someone else to do it, or they're kind of paranoid about hiring someone out there and they're like, I don't want someone else to mess this up. I'm going to do it myself. Usually, unless your skill set is really in line with it, I would say your skill set being in line with that is like you maybe have a little bit of development knowledge, you're definitely tech savvy, you know a little bit of design work, and like you have a good feel for colors and logos and themes and that kind of stuff. Unless you fall into that camp, typically you're gonna have to have someone eventually redo the work that you do anyway. So I don't usually recommend the first path, again, unless you have a little bit of that technical foundation and you have the time that you want to invest, you have a little bit of design knowledge there, and you're like, I can work with this, I can figure this out, and I have a low budget, so I need to do that. That makes sense to me. The next path is kind of the middle path, and what I'd say most honestly, people who either have some previous business success or have a full-time job and they don't have enough time to spend on this on the weekends or after late hours after their work, they usually typically go down this path, which is to find a provider who can help you either install a theme or to pick a theme or a couple themes that can get your Shopify store up really quickly. Of those options, I typically recommend that if you pick someone who has a little bit of creativity, who understands your vision, who understands what it is you're trying to create and like the feel of the brand, it actually pays to lean a little bit on their creative impulses and like their good decision making in order to bring to you a couple of ideas or a couple of themes or palettes, color schemes, etc. that you can work with and be like, okay, I want this one or that one, right? It'd be similar to if you're hiring a designer, let's just say for your house, you could just be like, I want this and that and this and this. You can tell them exactly what they want. Or you could be like, hey, bring to me a few ideas. We'll work with you. We'll figure out the best one and maybe bring in a few of my own personal elements that I want in the design of my house. Usually that works a lot better because the designer or the person who's making your house look really great already has a little bit of creativity, right, built in. If you're doing it yourself, not always the case, and you might end up with what you want exactly, but it doesn't always feel the way you want, or it's not exactly what you had in mind, right? So of the second path, I'd usually recommend working with someone, having them pick out some for you, and then you kind of go from there in that decision-making process. However, if you want to, like I said, you could technically get them to do exactly what you want to do, just might not always end up with the end result that you really were hoping for. The final option is, to me, what a lot of old school people who have a little more outdated idea of how development work works typically go with this approach. And the reason why they do comes out to do with a lot of fear and also what a marketing agency, a really big marketing or development agency has sold them is the correct way to do it, and steer clear. So this is something that you should be aware of, and I will give you an example as to where I think this path does do well. So this path is basically when a marketing agency comes up to you or a development agency and they're like, man, like we totally understand this idea that you want to go with, and we want to make sure that you have the absolute best tools and the best robust framework and the best technology. You know what, man? We're going to build you a custom store just for you. Gonna be the best. Gonna be amazing design. Gonna look so good with functionality. We're gonna build you a custom store, and that's gonna be what's gonna last you for years to come. Worst option possible. And here's why. The reason why it's a bad option, again, it's not a bad option for everyone. This is my opinion. I think it's a bad option because for the average business owner out there, there is enough in the way of theme customization and apps and tools out there that you can already use with Shopify that are easy to customize. When you go and you start to make a custom theme, that translates into, lots of work hours, right? Lots of time put in, lots of stuff. It's similar to like if you're going and refurbishing a house, right? You go into the house and the contractor's like, you know what? I can fix that, and I can do all this work for you. Let's just redo everything, right? It's gonna cost you an arm and a leg when you haven't even checked or thought about, okay, how old is the piping system? Or can this actually work? Do I really need to replace everything in this house if I'm gonna refurbish it, right? You can think a little bit more critically here. So when it comes to this third option, usually people get sold on like a really robust custom site or something like that, and it doesn't usually go very well, okay? And there are a few reasons. The first reason is maintenance, right? So just because someone built you a custom site doesn't mean that you know how to maintain that website. The great thing about Shopify is that it's really easy to teach and to learn. It will take time, but someone can teach you and create tutorial videos, supplementary education to show you how to use a particular theme or how the store works, or they can train one of your employees or future employees as to how to use that. When it comes to a custom site, not everything usually is customizable within that site. So someone might come back to you and be like, oh, you know what, we actually didn't build that into the theme. We got to add in something new, a new extension, or this is all based in hard coding. We can't really make any edits. There isn't that user interface maybe, right? So it's not always good from a maintenance perspective, and typically it's built that way because then the marketing agency or the development agency has work because they're going to be maintaining the site, right? So to me, it's just like it's bloated costs. The other thing is the actual supportive community, right? So if someone is doing a custom site for you, their main problem solving is typically like spent Googling around online trying to solve different coding bugs and that kind of stuff. It's not like, you think of like a film, right? A film is like the hacker and he's always like typing really fast and like figuring out how to make a website, right? It's not like that. Most people are just like spending a lot of time looking at their computer trying to figure out a problem and Googling around online to solve that problem. If it's a custom-based site, it's all then going to be hard-coded into the site, right? If it's not a custom-based site, the cool thing is that with an existing robust Shopify theme, anyone can go on there and they can look at the support community comments and they can see some of the regular issues that are cropping up. And because it's built by an established developer, that developer as well is regularly updating the theme. Think about that. Technology goes out of style. Things change. Like HTML5 wasn't always a thing, right? Or different changes when it comes to CSS or website design, etc. Mobile friendly. Websites weren't always made to be responsive and mobile friendly, right? But if you have a developer who's consistently updating a theme, you're going to be able to take advantage for that at a fraction of the cost than if you were to pay an external firm to be updating your website every year or every 2 years. So it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to me there. And the final thing I would say when it comes to that is also just usability, where you or someone else, if you have to fire that development company, let's just say, it's really easy for someone else. If you already have a theme with a robust marketplace, has regular updates, people have created the tutorial videos for that, you can always swap in and out the people that are running the store. Not always the case if it's more of a custom theme and people don't understand everything that went into that, or it's almost like duct tape fixes and you only find out when you pull out the walls, you're like, oh, this actually wasn't done correctly. This electrical wiring wasn't done correctly, right? So you want to make sure that you have a good theme, and that starts usually with, if you're on the, I'd say medium budget side, going with the middle route that I was talking about. Now, the reason, in my opinion, it would make sense to do a custom site is if you really want something that's going to be like some kind of really powerful functionality that you can't find with any Shopify app, with any theme that's out there, and it's just light years ahead of stuff, or you're building other stuff like augmented reality and you can't find some good stuff there. If you want something that's a little bit more high tech, or for whatever reason you can't find, or the actual company can't find any solutions to it, that might be the reason that you would want more of a custom theme. The other one would be, I would say, is if you're a really high grade like security company and you want to make sure that you have really strong internal controls and you have a lot of money to spend on it, like you're a very well funded company, that might be another example, right? Where you can afford, it doesn't matter to you the cost as much, you can afford to hire a team of developers to maintain this thing year round, year out. But that's usually not the typical person that I find when it comes to just setting up a new store. Once you get through this process of the actual store functionality, the theme, the look and the feel, and that kind of stuff, You then start to transition into the next phase of setting up a store and the costs that are required when it comes to that. And the cool thing is that you now have the butterfly net, you now have the mousetrap, you now have the house. It's like, it's there, right? It's there, it works, people can go and order stuff. The question is now about foot traffic. So I like to kind of relate this to traditional stores because it just makes a lot of sense to me, right? You think of a traditional store, right? Let's take McDonald's, for example. So one of my favorite movies is The Founder. The founder of McDonald's, and kind of like Ray Kroc as well. And like, I'm not going to spoil the story for you if you've never seen the movie The Founder. You should go and watch it if you're an entrepreneur. A really great example to me of like leadership. But that being said, also some not so great stuff. But that being said, this movie really to me illustrates the way that the make and the mold or the layout of a store can impact its sales. So what ended up happening with The Founder, and I verified this looking into some of the history of McDonald's, is that at a certain point in time, the founders of McDonald's decided to change up the layout of their store. So rather than in the olden days, people just coming, for example, to your car window and taking your order on roller skates, or having you do a sit-down restaurant, they decided they wanted to revolutionize the entire way that the system worked. So what they did was they had people actually come up to the window, right? And people made an order line, and it progressed very quickly. And they even did more things, like within the actual restaurant in the kitchen, they had a custom built kitchen where they could make sure that there was efficient use of time and energy for the cooks, and that people weren't bumping into each other, right? So they rethought the actual layout of the store and also the internal workings of the store. And that led to like a rush of revenue, right? And just incredible efficiency that no one had ever seen before. And they call it the Speedy system, right? So really interesting concept. Same thing applies to your existing store. So once you get everything up and running, the next kind of process is to begin to get traffic and to begin to optimize. So the way you go and get traffic could be organic, for example, talking about it, going to trade shows, if you want to, I guess, old school ways, conferences, right? You can be doing blog posts, like social media. There's those kind of organic ways. Most store owners nowadays are hiring a marketer like myself or other people that are out there. They're helping them with social media advertising, pay-per-click advertising. You want to call this like a media buyer in more like marketing parlance, if you will. But that's someone who's going to go out there and be placing ads for you, have a strategy behind it, managing budgets, and measuring the cost to acquire a customer and ways in which to improve that. So typically that might be Facebook advertising, Instagram advertising, Google ads, maybe experimenting with new platforms like TikTok, etc. But basically they're trying to drive traffic, drive foot traffic to the store. Then what ends up happening is when you have enough foot traffic, you can begin to optimize the thing. So you can begin to look like, oh, okay, if we send people to this page, this percentage of them become buyers. This is the cost to acquire a buyer or a customer. How can we decrease that? Do we need to make better photos, higher resolution photos, images, moving images, video, high quality video, that kind of stuff? Do we need to put that on the page maybe? And you start to think this through a tiny bit more. And that's to me when you get into the optimization stage of the store, when you're getting traffic there regularly, you're continually optimizing it, you get it to a point where you're really happy and you're like, okay, I understand if I spend, $1,000 this month on ads, this is what it's going to bring in terms of revenue after the expenses. This is what the bottom line is going to be. Okay, this is the cost to acquire a customer. This makes sense. Let's see if these numbers continue to hold. Let's begin to scale up the store. And that's when different expenses come into play when it comes to like larger marketing budgets, higher quality creatives and video and that kind of stuff. And the budget there usually comes from you're already seeing success, so it makes sense to reinvest, right, into the store. And then you kind of supercharge this thing and you start scaling up higher and higher and higher. And typically to do that, you obviously need to have product market fit, but you're also figuring out the best way to market to your customer and figuring out more of who your actual customer is. And that's also when you begin to think about maybe like other product ideas or add-ons or upsells or downsells or cross-sells or ways in which you can increase the overall order value that you receive from a customer and also the lifetime value of that customer. How often are they repeating their purchase, right? When are they coming back to figure out the new announcements of sales that you have a spring sale or a summer sale, and like the different marketing mechanisms that go into that. And to me, that's kind of like you're getting to more of the maturation stage with the store. There's a lot more stuff we could talk about in the way of expenses. I kind of want to leave you with one final thought. And that's that in business, you usually have time-related expenses and you have monetary-related expenses. You could argue there are some other ones there, but those are like the main ones, right? So typically when you're getting started, if you have a low budget, you have a high number of time-related expenses. And by that I mean you're spending a lot of time, the opportunity cost for your time, which you could be doing other stuff like spending time with your friends, your significant other, building other businesses. There's a high opportunity cost, right? And you're spending lots and lots of time setting up a store or learning this kind of stuff, etc. You then also have a budget. So maybe you're figuring out, okay, what can I not do? What am I gonna hire other people to do? Who are my partners gonna be long-term? And how can I kind of make the most of this particular project by spending a lot of my time, but also working with other people? And that's kind of like, to me, the best of both worlds. And then finally, you have other people who have a big enough budget just to have someone else take over it entirely, right? And that's when that person, that business owner, usually they have previous success in some ways in their career or in their business, and they're like, you know what? I don't want to do any of this myself. I don't want to figure out the logistics of the store. I don't want to figure out the marketing of the store. I don't want to figure out any of that. I'm just going to hire someone else to do that, right? And they're more of just like behind the scenes, watching everything come together, making sure there's some quality control and that stuff. Very low time related costs, but very higher financial costs, right? And that's going to be for someone who also already has a very high opportunity cost with their time. So for example, if you're already really successful, for you to spend an hour to try and figure something out, you could be doing a ton of other stuff, right? Or you could just be enjoying your life way more. So it makes sense to allocate and to make sure that someone else does it, and then you're just kind of overseeing the operation. So to me, those are the three major costs, or I guess models, when it comes to time-related versus budget costs, but it's gonna be different for everyone. So I tried to make this video to just share with you, I guess, my way of thinking when it comes to the expenses that go into setting up a Shopify store. And hopefully by this point in the video, at least you feel a little bit more confident in understanding it. If you don't, you can always reach out to me at my website, crowdcrux.com. That's crowdcrux.com. You can go there. You can learn more. For example, you can shoot me an email if you wanted to. I also got some great resources I'll include in the description down below. Some cool stuff you can take action on if you haven't yet, start your store, etc. But I hope you found this video to be helpful. Again, my name is Salvador Briggman. Give me a thumbs up if you did like it, and I'll see you next time.